Starting the meeting now.
Okay. Well, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to Cabinet. Today, I'm Peter Fox, leader of the council. A big welcome to anybody who might watch in on this, or who may be watching live or be watching a webcast afterward. Can I ask my colleague cabinet members to introduce themselves? I'll just call you in one at a time. Bob.
Hi, Bob Greenland, Deputy Leader and responsibility for enterprise and land use planning.
Penny. I'll come back to Penny. Jane.
Jane Pratt, Cabinet Member for Infrastructure and Neighbourhood Services.
Phil.
Phil Murphy, Cabinet Member for Resources.
Sarah. That's not Sarah, that's Penny. Do you want to say hello, Penny?
Hi, I'm Penny Jones and I'm Cabinet Member for Social Services, Health and Safeguarding.
Thanks, Penny. Sarah.
Hi, Sarah Jones, Cabinet Member for Social Justice and Community Development.
Paul.
Paul Jordan, Cabinet Member for Governance and Law.
And last but not least, Richard.
Richard John, Cabinet Member for Children, Young People and Mon Life.
Thank you all. And can I also welcome Dimitri Petruni, the leader of the Labour group, and Councillor Simon Howarth, the leader of the Independent group. We have apologies today from Councillor Joe Watkins, the leader of the Liberal group. Okay, so I've covered apologies for absence in that start. So we go on to item 2, declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest at this point? No. Okay. If you find one as you go through, you know the usual procedure. Please announce that verbally and fill in. We can fill in the electronic pro forma, which will follow. Okay, so I'm going to go on then to item 3, and that's to consider the following reports. And the first then is item 4 there, the future of the garden waste collection service. Penny, can you turn your camera off, please? And Jane, I'll invite you in.
Thank you very much, Leader. I would like to ask Carl Tuhig, who's my lead officer on this, who's going to introduce the report, and then I will speak directly afterwards, if that's okay with you.
Okay, thank you, Jane. So can I invite Carl in then, please?
Thank you, Councillor. The garden waste report is looking to approve the use of wheeled bins. There was an addendum sent out earlier part of this week that shows the revised costs, but I'll run through all that now as we move through. So the report sets out how we can continue to deliver this much wanted but non-statutory waste collection service. The introduction of wheel bins enables the service to move to fortnightly collection as set out in the Welsh Government Collections Blueprint and towards zero waste. As I said, since issuing the report, we've received confirmation of funding from Welsh Government through the Circular Economy Fund, and that will reduce the proposed cost down to £28 instead of £35. So hopefully everyone's seen that addendum that was sent out on Monday. It also details the addendum details the impact of what that means to the service in collection costs and what it means to the service going forward. So that's covered within that addendum for this report. The opportunity to review the service is aligned to the need to renew the collection vehicles. The vehicles are now 8 and 9 years old and need to be renewed. So changing the service at this point in time made complete sense. The £28 for the service recovers the full costs of the collections. We recognise that a 54% increase in cost to residents is substantial, but the bins do provide additional capacity, and the equivalent cost of 80 litres are 46 pence if we stayed with bags, and 46.66 pence for bins, or a 1.5% increase. So when you're talking about the literage, it's a much smaller increase in cost. The bins are fully supported by the staff and unions. Garden waste remains one of the heaviest materials we collect, and we have a duty to reduce risk for staff wherever practicable for health and safety reasons. Wheel bins are not new to the county. They're already in use across the county for commercial collections from businesses, from flats, from schools and from council buildings. So we know how bins work, and the crews are comfortable with loading and unloading those already. We did a survey earlier on this year, and over half of the customers who responded to the survey, 54% of those said they would prefer to move to bins. The survey also captured responses from non-existing customers, and there was even stronger support and commitment to use the service if there was a move to wheel bins. So the move to wheel bins is supported by our existing customer base. The report was also taken through a members' workshop in strong communities. It was debated at length, and where possible, we've revised the report to reflect the concerns raised. The proposed cost of £35 within the report was the most challenged point, but I believe the grant funding and the reduced cost of £28 will now be more acceptable. Following the Strong Community Select session, we also sent out responded to all the queries that were raised, and we distributed that to the committee. We recognise that no service will meet the needs of every resident, but bins are supported by 54% of our existing customers and 75% of non-customers. We have agreed to work with people that can manage bins, whether that's because they can't accommodate them or because they have other needs. We will work with those residents to provide a service that meets their needs. We do that with every service that we currently operate, and we will continue to do that. At this point, and talking through it with many of colleagues in other councils, we believe the number of people that won't be able to manage bin will be very small and will be manageable. So I think we've debated this at length through Strong Community Select. We've also debated it at length through the members' workshop. So I'm hoping that everyone has a really good understanding of what the proposal is. I'm hoping that the £28 cost is now much more acceptable to everyone, and it shows that Welsh Government is in full support of a move to wheel bins, as they recognise that this is a much more sustainable and future-proof service. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Carl. Jane, would you like to come in now?
Thank you very much, Leader. And obviously, since the papers were released, we have been awarded this grant, which will help with the provision of the Green Waste service. And it's welcome news that we can reduce the cost of the wheelie bin to £28. I would like to thank officers in the waste team for all their hard work that pulled off this successful bid, especially Laura Carter, Carl Tuig and Dewi Lane. Welsh Government have supported our application to introduce wheeled bins, which they consider to be an enhancement to the service, as it will reduce collection costs and subsequent carbon impact and align with the Welsh Government collection blueprint. The proposed cost of £28 does include a 5% contingency to cover customers that decide not to join the scheme. And if we do not see this drop off, we would pass any reductions in cost to our customers next year, as we do not make any profit from this service. The proposed fortnightly bin is manufactured from up to 100% recycled material and is recyclable at the end of its life. And the wheelie bin is supported by the health and safety best practice, as Carl said, and it is supported by our crews and trade unions. The bags, on the other hand, require a large amount of manual handling by our waste teams, up to 1,000 bags a day lifted by one operative, which equates to 8 tons of lifting in a day. This is clearly not good practice anymore, because the alternative wheelie bin will not have the negative impact on the musculoskeletal systems of our valued frontline staff. The Green Waste Service is greatly valued by those residents that use it, but it is now time to move forward with a more sustainable service that will not require subsidy by our council taxpayers. This council is facing unprecedented budget pressures next year, and we have to become more resourceful and careful with every pound of taxpayers' money we spend. Actions like this will mean we can protect the statutory services we are responsible for, such as education and looking after our vulnerable older and younger residents, while still maintaining an excellent service in a better way for our residents. To conclude, the benefits of the £28 wheelie bin for green waste are: the price will cover the cost of the service, delivery with no subsidy. It provides value for money, as in real terms it is not more expensive than the bag per litre, and it holds much more. 54% of our residents said in our survey that they preferred a wheelie bin, and it is best practice supported by our crews and trade unions. It also follows Welsh Government collection blueprint. The bin also provides a useful storage container in the winter for autumn leaves when the service is not running, and this new system of garden waste collection is a sustainable and self-funding solution that allows us to continue to offer our residents an excellent service fit for the 21st century. I thoroughly recommend this report and recommendation to Cabinet, including the addendum, to approve an annual charge of £28 following circular economy grant approval funding for wheeled bins. Thank you very much, Leader.
Yeah, well, thank you, Jane, and thank you, Carl, and thanks for everybody who's been part of arriving at this report today. Members for your contributions in the various select committees. Strong Communities, I know, had a long go on this, and the public for contributing as part of the various consultations. Obviously, I don't, as a farmer, I don't use the system, but I know how popular it is. I remember the days when we didn't have a green waste collection, and when we introduced it, I know it was very welcomed, and it's important we keep it going. But I think the levels of subsidy we've been applying over recent years just are not feasible anymore in this world we're facing now, where resources are so limited and so uncertain. So it's great that we found an alternative which can meet so many positive objectives, certainly the health and safety issues, but also is self-funding and gives a better system to all. I know there'll be some people who prefer probably the older system, but we do need to move on for all of the reasons we shared. But I'm really pleased Carl reassured us about the assisted provision, which we always offer when we have any changes or any of our services. So I'm confident that we've got those bases covered, and I'm pleased, Jane, that you've shared that we've been fortunate in being able to drop that price down to £28. And as you pointed out, this isn't something we make profit out of, but if we can reduce the subsidy, because you know it's a fair challenge. Why should everybody in the county contribute to a green waste service when lots of them don't use a green waste service? We can't. We have to move away from that. So thanks for that, Jane. So I'm going to invite colleagues in now, and I have Penny up first.
Oh, thank you, Leader. You've said it all, really, so there isn't much to say, but I'd just like to offer my support to the recommendations. We need to make savings everywhere, and to support all services, but especially, I'm going to speak up, of course, for social care and health. But this time of pandemic and the winter months ahead, every penny will count. So I'm very in favour of this move. Thank you. Thank you, Penny. Phil.
Yeah, thank you, Leader. And basically picking up on the same theme. I said in the recent debate, didn't I, that we need to be concentrating on where we're efficient and where we can improve efficiency even on existing well-run services. We need to be doing it. Clearly, in the current climate, all budgets have to stay within their allocated funding. So this is a positive drive along that route. So I fully support it.
Thank you, Phil. Any other colleagues wish to come in? Yes, Paul and then Richard.
Thank you, Leader. I mean, clearly we've been subsidising this service up to the extent of £330,000, and that's £330,000 we can put into other services. And there's certainly no need for those who do not partake in this service to make any subsidy. So yeah, fully supporting of this.
Thank you, Richard.
Yeah, absolutely echo comments from colleagues. I think I would have felt a bit uncomfortable if we were looking at effectively doubling the price. I appreciate even though we're trebling the size of the receptacle, I think doubling the price would have been challenging, I think. But you're absolutely right. It is a very popular service, but I do appreciate that. Particularly after it's rained, these bags can be extremely heavy if they're full, and with obviously implications for our staff. But for many years, people who live in flats and perhaps don't have a garden, or people who compost their garden waste at home, have effectively been subsidising perhaps people who can afford to pay, who have very large gardens and use the service. Well, why should they be subsidised by people who don't use the service and can't use it, or compost their garden waste at home? So I think there's a really strong social justice argument for what we're doing today. It is an optional service. It's there if you want to use it, but if you want to compost your garden waste at home, then you can do that. So I think this is absolutely the right thing to be doing.
Yeah. Thank you, Richard. And I'm right, Jane, that you can still take your waste to a recycling centre if you want to. If you want to do that yourself, that's correct, isn't it?
Yes, of course you can. And obviously we've got 3 household waste recycling centres which do take the green waste. And also, once we move over to wheeled bins, if people have still got stocks of bags, they'll be able to continue to make use of those in the home. Although one of the problems that we had that we were replacing 70% of the bags every year, and we were having to import them from abroad, and they're not recyclable at the end of their life. So, but yes, certainly people can continue to use the household waste recycling centres, which will actually be closed during the fire break, but they will be open afterwards. Thank you.
Thanks, Jane. Okay, no more cabinet members in the bar to speak. Can I invite Simon? Simon, you had a couple of questions that I'm sure Jane will be able to answer.
Thank you, Leader. Good afternoon, everyone. Yeah, my first question is reference to the green waste. Is their officer confident the green waste collection that it will help towards our targets? As we know, the green waste is an heavy recyclate, and as we know, tonnage, and what we're going through for recycled green waste has been a real bonus for us on our recycled targets. The problem we do have, Leader, and I've seen it for a few years now, is it's dropping off on green waste, and we've just rightly said that people can take their green waste to the landfill, to our sites. So us as an authority are having to subsidise that. You're very rightly in saying that, but what I don't want to do is it drop off even further by altering the system. Like 50% of people are happy to take the new system. So that's my question to him: is the officer actually confident that we can maintain this service? Because if it drops off too much, there's no point in having the service. And that leads into my next question then. It's okay to say we've had the grant of X, Y, A, B and C, but if we don't meet the target, we've got fines to pay, or we'll have to meet the target, because we've got the fines. But the investment we've had to make in vehicles to subsidise this, i.e., the vehicles will have to have the lifting apparatus on them to lift this to lift these bins. And don't forget, this service only runs from Easter time, from March, April time through to October, November time. So we have 6 months of apparatus on vehicles which we won't be able to use. Now, is that apparatus removable? These vehicles possibly off the top of my head, that's why I asked the question, around about probably well over £200,000 each. And I know we have to invest in vehicles, but that's a lot of money to, in brackets, lift green waste. So it's not just about that as well. There are other investments we've had to make. And as I say, cash is tight at the moment. So they're my two questions, really, straightforward questions. Thank you, Leader.
Yeah, thanks very much, Simon. Jane, do you want to answer those? And feel free to bring Carl in if you need to.
Yeah, thank you very much, Councillor Howarth, for those very valid questions. And I'll deal with the one about the waste targets to begin with. We obviously have looked at the modelling of our neighbouring authorities that have moved over to wheeled bins, and we are able to see, you know, what the drop-off rate has been there, and we're confident that the contingency that we've put in place will manage any drop-off, and we've also had the benefit of having the survey, which, you know, we actually had people saying they haven't used the service before, but if we move to wheeled bins, they'll actually sign up to it. And 54% of people said they preferred the wheeled bins. So, you know, we're confident, and it is a fine line. You're absolutely right. I think, you know, we will have to review it, and hopefully, you know, we'll have such a good take up on it that we'll be able to give something back to our residents. That's what we're hoping. It is correct that waste targets, you know, as you say, the targets are weight-based. The more material that is recycled and the less that is sent for energy recovery, the higher the recycling performance, and every kilo counts, regardless of the material type. Welsh Government did recognise that this caused perverse outcomes where people chased cheaper recycling at the expense of the waste hierarchy, but that was when targets are lower. This is far less likely to happen now, and all materials need to be recycled to meet the 70%. Waste reduction should always be our priority, and we've also got to bear in mind that Wales wants to be the #1 in recycling, and you know they are going to be putting up the targets up to 80% in the near future. So you know we've got to be prepared for that and the way that we actually manage our waste. Moving on to the question of vehicles, no vehicles have yet been ordered because, you know, we do need to purchase vehicles, whether the decision is made to stick with bags or move to bins, and we are awaiting obviously the Cabinet decision today. We have 4 26-tonne vehicles on a 2012 plate which need replacing as soon as possible. If the decision is made to move to wheelie bins, the garden waste fleet will consist of 1 26-tonne, which will be new, and the purchase price is £185,000. We've got 1 18-tonner, which is in our existing fleet, and we'll have 1 7.5 tonne, which is estimated to cost £87,000. The 26-tonne rather will have a specialist lift for wheeled bins, which means it is not suitable for manual loading. But the 18-tonne and 7.5 tonne will have tuck under lifts, which can be manually loaded, so can be used for other purposes if needed. So, you know, the fleet is going to be flexible. At the same time, we also need to purchase a 1 26-tonne trade vehicle and 1 26-tonne spare. And the estimated costs of this spare will be £185,000, but this will be shared between garden waste and the trade waste service that we offer. So the total costs of the new vehicles, which will be allocated to garden waste if we move over to the bins, is £185,000 plus £87,000. Obviously, we've got the circular economy grant funding. So, you know, we've actually got an existing budget as we are replacing the fleet. I don't know whether that answers your question. Carl, is there anything I've missed there? Is there anything you'd like to add?
No, I think you've covered everything off, Councillor. We do need new vehicles. There is an additional cost of the lift on the 26-tonne vehicle, but these vehicles we are able to use them on trade waste and use them for other things. We appreciate that the cost of any refuse vehicle is is very expensive, but we do need to provide this service. So we would need the vehicles, whatever decision is taken on whether it's bins or bags, we still need these vehicles.
Thank you, Leader. No problem.
Yeah, thanks, Simon. Thank you, Carl. Thank you, Jane. And we mustn't forget that message around health and safety of our staff as well. You know, somebody having to lift 8 tons of stuff a day, and that won't be only one day a week. They'll be working every day. You know, that is an awful lot to expect people, and I think it's absolutely right and proper that we think of our staff as well as all the other aspects of this. So the recommendations are before us there. I'll read through them quickly, and there's a slight amendment to the last one, obviously. So 2.1, the recommendation for Cabinet are to approve the change of frequency of collection of green waste and weekly to fortnightly, to approve the change of container from an 80-litre garden waste bag to a 240-litre wheeled bin, and to approve an annual charge to customers of £28 instead of 35. I think that's right. If you're happy with those recommendations, the vote box is in the chat bar, so can you vote now, please? There we got it. That's it. That's 8, and that's unanimous. So thanks very much again. Carl, can I take our thanks back to your staff for the work they've been doing and the preparation to move to where we are now. So big thanks. Okay, I'm going to move us now on to the next item, and as well, I didn't share it, but I'm going to reverse the next 2 items. So I'm going to bring item 6 first, and that is the revenue and capital monitoring report, and then we'll follow it up with the medium-term financial plan. It's more logistically, it makes more sense. Okay, so I'll invite Phil Murphy in, please.
Yes, thank you, Leader. And the purpose of this report is to provide members with a forecast of the revenue and capital outturn position for the current financial year, and to provide an update on the financial impact of COVID-19 on the Council, which everybody knows has been really quite substantial. In amongst the recommendations are that Cabinet recognised the net revenue forecast deficit at month 5 of 7.42 million, an improvement of 2.95 million from month 2. We must bear in mind here that the forecast in month 2 was based on the best available information at that time. But this is a very fast moving situation here, and that's reflected in this report. But some 6.19 million of that deficit was directly associated with the extraordinary financial pressures attached to COVID-19. Cabinet continues to make strong representations to Welsh Government, either directly ourselves or through the WLGA, for full reimbursement of the monies associated with COVID-19. Currently that's 6.19 million, and so that leaves the Council with a reduced sum of 1.23 million to address as a true in-year pressure resulting from the in-year savings secured to date. And there's charts and tables later on in this report that reflect all of that. 675,000 of the identified pressure currently within the month 5 revenue forecast is recognised as eligible expenditure to be funded from capital receipts under the Capital Receipts Directive, the Flexible Use Directive. So that reduces the target to 1.23 million, or from the 1.23 million, I should say, to an in-year pressure of 555,000. The 555,000 can be managed, we're quite confident, through cost reduction, and immediate steps are being taken to curtail non-essential expenditure, recognising that the target and the planned cost reductions will be very challenging. in the current operating environment, and given the council will always look to minimise the impact on service delivery and always try to maintain services wherever we can. Cabinet's also asked to agree that the 2019-20 year-end one-off headroom added to the council fund of 1.8 million. You recall that was a surplus from last year, given the one-off windfalls that we had. And they're using that to mitigate any under recovery of the 6.19 million should Welsh Government not be able to cover it all. Because there are very significant financial pressures brought about by the pandemic, and who knows, there could be other things. There's the winter coming up and we don't know quite what's going to come out of that. So we had intended to prepare a full budget recovery plan at this stage, given the size of the forecasted overspend earlier in the year. But this has now been suspended given the current forecast. Since entering 2020, the council has faced significant and unprecedented challenges, notably in flood response and recovery resulting from storms Ciara and Dennis in February, and the subsequent COVID-19 pandemic and the impact of the lockdown restrictions that were put into effect on the 23rd of March. Of course, we lost an incredible amount of our income that supports the budget for frontline services during that period and continue to do so. This forecast comprises the COVID-19 income losses, which are 4.83 million, and additional costs of 1.36 million alongside non-COVID-19 pressures of the 1.23 million that I mentioned before. The non-COVID-19 pressures have in part resulted from the implementation of budget savings proposals for 2021 being delayed. So it's important to note that the forecast overspend of 7.42 million is a worst case scenario, and it doesn't take any account of any further Welsh Government funding anticipated to meet the additional costs. And as I said earlier, if they don't meet the whole of that 6.19 million, we have that 1.83 million in reserve. The council has got that in reserve, as I said, and it will help out should that situation arises. So we've got the 675,000 identified pressure within that 1.23 million from capital receipts, and we've got the intention to reduce further by managing down that 555,000 through cost reduction wherever we possibly can. As usual, Leader, this is a very comprehensive report covering considerable detail, so I'll stop here, but it's worth pointing out that in tables 1 and 2, following this part of the report, there's a considerable amount of detail showing how directorates have managed to make savings so far, leading us through to that reduction that we're now forecasting. One item of note, which is the largest item there, is in corporate costs levies. Corporate costs and levies, and it's £1.3 million, and that's as a result of the pressure that was seen at month 2 being assimilated now into directed budgets with regards to the wage increase. So as I say, Leader, I'll leave it at that. It's quite a stark picture, but at the moment manageable.
Yeah, thank you, Phil. There's a huge amount of work going on in this, I know, and it's been moving so fast. So I welcome the report. I welcome the direction it's heading. I think there are still quite a lot of ifs in there, but I have to say I do have confidence in Welsh Government coming forward with the money to cover our costs. But I think there's still quite a lot of unknowns as we're moving in and moving into that next phase of COVID and the challenges that are going to come along with that, and who knows what the implications are going to be on our budget later this year and perhaps into the start of next year. So we've got to take it steadily as it comes. So yeah, thanks for the report and support that 1.8 million going into reserves, ready to cover any shortfall if there is need be. Peter, would you like to come in on anything here?
Thank you, Leader. It's only a couple of points really, because I think in what Councillor Murphy has sort of outlined in taking Cabinet through the report and your comments, you've covered off nearly everything. But I think the two key points to stress: firstly, we've increased the frequency of our budget monitoring, and that's right and proper given, as you say, the levels of continued uncertainty that we have. And obviously the situation continues to evolve even this week. So with that, we will have a month 7 and a month 9 budget monitoring report coming through to you for consideration. It's really important that we're really timely in our response to any changes in the forecast. And the second point, again to reinforce, off the back of the decisions by the decision by the First Minister and the announcement on Monday, I guess with further, in terms of our projections, they will be adjusted yet further by, I guess, services having to be closed and income shortfalls being beyond what we'd originally forecast. So clearly we will continue to work very closely with Welsh Government and to make sure that the funding that they have brought forward to date for local government and for local authorities in Wales, that continues to be sufficient to cover all of the losses and additional costs that we're going to incur. But clearly we would hope to have a more informed update when we bring the next budget monitoring report through to you for month 7.
And thank you, Peter. And can I thank you personally for the work you're doing with other Welsh treasurers? I mean, I know how busy you are with colleagues, you know, making sure that Wales government understand our position and making sure that you know, things don't get missed. And so I appreciate all you're doing and your team in that regard. Okay, thanks for that, Peter. Okay, colleagues, anybody wish to come in? No, I see nothing on the I'm assuming this is going to select committees, is it, shortly? Or...
Sorry, Leader. Yes, it will. It will be taken through select committees in due course for consideration. We just need to make sure, I guess, with the capacity constraints across the board at the minute, that we do that in the most effective way possible. So we'll be discussing that with colleagues internally and then communicating that to members. Okay, thanks very much, Peter. Okay then, so colleagues, if there's nobody else to speak, I'm going to move us to the recommendations. Now there's a lot of recommendations here. I think because Phil, as you drew us through the report, you utilised a lot of the recommendations. I think you captured those well within your opening. So I think I'm going to take the recommendations on block, and anybody at home who wishes to scrutinise those further, you know, you can find the papers on the council website and you'll be able to go through all of those yourselves. But it'll take me half an hour to go through this lot. So the recommendations 2, I'm going to move those on block. So you can vote now, please, in the chat line. Okay, thank you very much, members. That's unanimous. Thank you once again, Phil. But you're straight back on now to the next report. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Leader. And we're now on to the medium-term financial plan and budget process, covering the period up to 24-25. And this report highlights the context within which that's going to be developed. As you know, we constantly have a 4-year medium-term financial plan, and we're updating it all of the time. Also in here is to agree the assumptions to be used for that updating, and I'll come to the assumptions at the end of what I'm going to say. And there is also a timetable attached to this report for developing the medium-term financial plan and the specific budget for 21-22. Members will know that over the last 4 years, the Council has adopted savings proposals totaling 22 million, and that process is getting more and more difficult, as we'll see as we go through this report. Now, the process has been adopted has sought to maintain a medium-term view on the financial position and planned savings targets over that 4-year period. In March, as you'll recall, we as Cabinet approved the budget for 2021 and acknowledged in the medium-term financial plan, based on consistent modelling assumptions, an indicative gap in resourcing of around 3.9 million to meet the gap over the following years of the plan. Since entering 2020, the Council has faced significant and unprecedented challenges, notably the flooding that I mentioned in the previous report, and obviously COVID-19. So the Council has tactically generated that headroom of 1.8 million that we referred to just now, and that, as I said before, is to be used to mitigate any part of the under recovery, if there is any, in COVID-19, as well as allowing the authority the flexibility to respond to any potential significant financial pressures, either with regards to the pandemic or otherwise in the current year or over that medium term. The Council continues to deal with unprecedented amounts of uncertainty with its finances, both in terms of the current year as the pandemic continues, as well as next year and over the medium term, where there remains significant uncertainty as to the funding outlook for local authorities in Wales. The current situation was dealt with in that previous report, so I won't go further into that now, except to say that in that month 5 forecast, remember we were talking about an overspend of 7.42 million, and that's 6.19 million of COVID deficit. Whilst the Council is taking recovery action and bearing down on non-essential expenditure within the current year, and the inherent pressures estimated in excess of 3 million will clearly have to have a bearing on the budget for 21-22, and over the medium term, unless suitably mitigated through much needed additional funding from Welsh Government. However, it appears that there will be no formal autumn budget from the Chancellor this year, but there will be a spending review announcement, and it's likely to have a 1-year planning horizon, given the current and ongoing state of uncertainty with the impact of the pandemic on the UK government finances. Welsh Government themselves await clarification on the funding it will receive next year, and to that extent, and given the funding decisions that will subsequently need to be made, leaves it very difficult to accurately make settlement predictions for next year, or for the next several years for that matter. Discussion with Welsh Government officials have suggested that we work on a 0% cash flatline, and the modelling assumption for using that as a modelling assumption for the aggregate external finance AEF for that period. The challenge is really with regards to uncertainty. The provisional settlement is now thought to be coming through on the 9th of December, and that's very close to our draft budget reports being released on consultation, and the final settlement is now anticipated somewhere around the 3rd of March, and of course we'll be setting our budget more or less straight away after that. So there is a considerable amount of uncertainty, and we won't get any clarity really in time for us to do much planning on it. I mentioned that I would go through the assumptions. The financial planning assumptions that we were working on are in 3.16 of this report, and in 3.20 the new assumptions are in there, And in the intervening sections, there are some items which I'll just do some of now. Maintaining the course settlement, as I said earlier, at 0%. Increased pay award for non-teaching staff of 2.75%. An increase in the pay assumption for teaching staff to 3.1%. These figures are well known to everybody. I just mention it for clarity. And council tax in 3.16, it was stated there that we've used 3.95% increase as a planning assumption for the whole of that period. And whilst council tax rises are a matter for Cabinet to preside over, for modelling purposes, and I stress for modelling purposes, in light of the continued financial challenges over the medium term, we've planned on a 4.95% increase for each year of the medium term financial plan, just to give us some sort of clarity over where we're going. But I stress that that is very much a matter for Cabinet to preside over later on in the process. So the effect of these changes on the deficit balance are anticipated to adjust illustrative shortfall requiring financial savings to 5.3 million in 2021-22 and savings totaling 22.5 million in aggregate by the end of the 4-year period. So the task for 21-22 will be harder than ever, I think, given the circumstances that prevail. It really is going to be quite a struggle. And then in 320, as I mentioned, are the current assumptions. So that, I think, is sufficient for this run through, Leader. As usual, this is a very, very comprehensive report. And as I say, it's going to be a tough time coming up.
Yeah, and thank you, Phil. Yeah, it certainly is. Those figures are eye-watering going forward, aren't they? 5.3 million, even on the basis of the assumptions you got there. 5.3 million rather for 21-22, and that 20 odd million for the term of the medium-term plan. That is, you know, that is a huge challenge for us. And you're quite right. We don't know. Well, we don't know what's happening. You know, next week we're going to see something which is going to really knock back income generation, as well as cutting people's services for a period. But we don't know what will happen after that. We don't know what will happen into next year and what the implications are. There's so many unknowns at the moment, so it is difficult for forward planning. I understand that. And can I reiterate that point you've made? We always put it in every year. We put an assumption for council tax for planning, because you can't build a model unless you've got an assumption. But it's something we do preside over. You're quite right. Nearer the time of setting budget, and we reserve the right to alter that accordingly as we see fit. Okay, colleagues, who'd like to come in? Don't all rush at once. Okay, right. Thanks very much. Well, I think it's pretty self-explanatory, and it's a challenging position. So, you know, what can you say about it apart from it's going to be difficult? But I have every confidence in the council and all departments to do all they can to narrow that gap. So the recommendations are in 2.1 and 2.2. And at 2.1, that the budget assumptions outlined in paragraph 3.15 to 3.21 in the report are agreed and updated during the budget process should better information become available. And in 2.2, that the budget process and timetable outlined in paragraph 3.29 is adopted, and that includes member budget scrutiny and consultation conducted through all member seminars, member and officer working groups, community engagement, select and consultation meetings for the business rate purposes. So those are the two recommendations. Can I ask you to vote now, please? Okay, that's unanimous. Thanks very much. And thanks, Phil, and thanks, officers, for all you're going to be doing again. We talked briefly, before we just close the meeting, we talked briefly about some of the challenges, and it'd be almost remiss not to just mention these. I'm sure they'll be mentioned again tomorrow in full council, but we are moving to that local lockdown, well, not local, a national lockdown on Friday for 2 weeks, and that is going to be challenging for many people. It's going to be challenging for individuals and families, and I worry for them. It's going to be very challenging for many businesses across Wales, and certainly our own businesses in Monmouthshire. And I know that we will be doing all we can to help those businesses. Our officers are gearing up ready to pass on the support which will be available, and I thank them in advance for that. I thank in advance the volunteers who are already actually out there checking in with those most vulnerable in our community, preparing them for the couple of weeks ahead, and a big thanks also to the people on our Track, Trace and Protect team, who have been doing an absolutely wonderful job in keeping and managing the cases as they emerge in Monmouthshire. Sadly, we've seen our cases escalating at quite a considerable rate over the last week. But I've every confidence in our team to continue that good work, and they're doing a brilliant and sterling job. So it's going to be a challenging time, but we will come through it. And what we'll be doing over the next few days and for the next couple of weeks, we'll be meeting closely with colleagues across Wales and government to understand better about what things will look like from the 9th of November on as we move forward. Let's hope that the effects that the firebreak lockdown has the effect we need to in time lower the R rate, so that we can hopefully enjoy coming back with our families and having Christmas together. So, but there's a bit of some few difficult steps to get through before we get there. So on that, can I thank everybody for their participation this afternoon, and thank you for anybody who may be looking in from home. We wish you well, and I'll close the meeting at that point. Thank you.